Hey guys, did you know about an event in the 17th century that history tried to hide? You're standing in the middle of a cobblestone street, somewhere in old Europe, the air thick with a faint smell of soot, like someone snuffed out 1,000 chimneys at once. Lamps flicker, shadows curl along the walls, and for a moment you feel like something enormous, something no textbook ever warned you about, has just exhaled around you. A quiet pressure settles on your ribs. It almost feels like you've stepped into a timeline that wasn't meant to survive. And honestly, you probably won't survive this story either, at least not without losing a tiny bit of faith in the neat little version of history you learned in school. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what your local time is. I love seeing the little constellation of night owls around the world. You trudge forward, noticing how the soot isn't just floating in the air. It's everywhere, forming a thin, eerie layer on rooftops, windowsills, even the curled edges of old parchment signs. This is your first real clue. Historians acknowledge that in the mid-1600s, massive volcanic eruptions, like the colossal 1640s event in Peru, sent ash drifting across continents. But the layer you're seeing feels too uniform, too synchronized. Almost as if the entire hemisphere inhaled and exhaled in the same catastrophic moment. A mainstream fact explains some of it, sure. Yet something about the texture under your fingertips whispers that this wasn't just nature clearing its throat. You walk deeper into the city, and the streets feel smaller. Not metaphorically, literally. Buildings stand awkwardly tall above doorways that sit too low, half swallowed by the ground. You remember old maps showing bustling populations here, but now the silence wraps around you like thick cloth. Whole neighborhoods look as if they shrank overnight. And here comes your first quirky tidbit. Some 17th century census books list entire districts with population numbers replaced with doodles. Actual doodles. Little birds, tiny spirals. One page just has a smug cat face. Historians still argue whether the scribes were bored, terrified, or trying to hide something. You step past a sunken tavern where only the rooftop pokes out of the earth, and inside you can just make out a crooked clock hanging sideways. Its hands are frozen at a time that probably never even happened. You've heard that after 1582's Gregorian reform, different regions adopted the new calendar at wildly different speeds, creating a kind of calendar chaos across Europe. That part's well documented. But here's what unsettles you. Star charts from the late 1600s show abrupt corrections, whole constellations slightly shifted. Not enough to be impossible, but enough to make astronomers at the time scratch their heads so hard they probably needed herbal tea afterward. You run a thumb across a damp stone wall and feel a faint vibration, like an old machine humming beneath the surface. Your breath frosts in the air even though it shouldn't be that cold. A soft chuckle escapes you as you realize your brain is starting to make jokes just to cope. Classic survival mechanism. Don't worry, everyone does it. Even 17th century scholars probably joke too, though theirs were mostly about plagues and leeches. Different times, different anxieties. As you move toward the edge of the old marketplace, the ash thickens again, swirling around your boots. You haven't pieced together the full picture yet, but you can sense it. Something happened here. Something big enough to leave scars in the ground, in the sky, and in the dusty margins of forgotten books. And deep down you feel the story beginning to pull you in, as if history itself is clearing its throat and saying, "Pay attention."
You continue walking, soot crunching softly under your boots, and the world around you feels increasingly mismatched. Like someone took the 17th century, shook it like a snow globe and hoped nobody would notice where the pieces landed. As you follow a narrow path out of the market square, the rooftops thin out and the silhouette of a ruined fortress rises ahead. It shouldn't be there. At least, not according to the neat historical summaries you remember scrolling through late at night when you were supposed to be sleeping. You step into the shadow of its broken gate and feel a faint draft of cold air wrapping around your ankles. This is one of those vanished empires you've always heard whispers about, the little polities that show up in a single, early modern report and then just stop existing. Mainstream historians admit that many 17th century states collapsed quietly under war, famine, or political absorption. That part is no mystery. But what you're seeing doesn't look like a slow fade. It looks like someone pressed the erase button, hard. Walls stand sliced cleanly in half, and you can't help but imagine some cosmic editor sighing, muttering, "Oops," and deleting entire governments the way you delete embarrassing old screenshots. A brittle banner flaps above you, its pattern half recognizable, half melted into the fabric, as if heat licked it and then thought better of finishing the job. You reach out, touch the cloth, and it crumbles instantly. So quickly you jerk your hand back with a startled laugh. Nice going. You've officially destroyed a sovereign state with one finger. If a museum curator saw that, they'd absolutely make that face. Yes, the "I'm not mad, just deeply, cosmically disappointed" face. As you climb over the broken stone, something catches your eye. A perfect horizontal stripe of mud hugging the lower third of the fortress. You freeze. There it is, the mudline mystery. Buildings across Europe, Asia, even the Americas share this odd signature. Walls partially buried by a thick, uniform layer of sediment. A fringe theory claims it all came from a single event, a global deluge of mud in the mid-1600s. Historians still argue whether this was a cluster of local floods, a side effect of climate cooling, or something stranger. You kneel down, run your hand across the line, and feel how smooth it is, like clay rubbed deliberately into place. This wasn't just rain. This was a blanket, tucked in by a very heavy hand. You move on, stepping through what used to be the central courtyard. The sky above looks wrong, too pale, too thin, almost washed out. A chilly gust sweeps past you, and you instinctively tighten your coat, even though you're pretty sure you didn't bring one. This must be what 17th century Europeans experienced during the mysterious Little Ice Age summers that felt like late autumn. A mainstream fact, 1641 to 1700 gave Europe some of its coldest recorded decades. But as you watch a faint shimmer ripple across the sky, just for a heartbeat, you feel something else lurking behind that historical explanation. You remember reading about a Danish diary from 1775, claiming the sun stayed dim for 40 days and nights without proper warmth. Another entry joked that even the cows looked offended. People back then coped with cold by leaning into humor too. Apparently that's a universal human trait. You look up again, half expecting to see the sun blink. It doesn't. But the light feels strained, like it's trying really hard to convince you nothing weird is happening. As you leave the fortress behind, the wind carries the scent of something metallic, almost electric. The landscape stretches ahead, dotted with more half-buried structures and lonely watchtowers whose tops peek out like stranded survivors. A quiet realization settles into your bones. These ruins aren't random. They form a pattern, one you've started noticing but haven't yet admitted to yourself. And as the distant horizon darkens into a smoky blue, you can't shake the feeling that you're walking through the aftermath of a reset so thorough, so synchronized, that only its shadows remain to tell the story.
You keep moving, the cold air brushing your cheeks like the exhale of an old world trying to remember how to breathe. Ahead of you rises a long, low building, its roof sagging, its windows boarded, its door hanging open as if history forgot to close it. You step inside, and the scent of old ink wraps around you instantly. It's warm, familiar, almost comforting, until you notice the rows of desks, each one scattered with parchment covered in scratch marks and corrected dates. You've walked straight into the Great Rewrite. You drift between the tables, fingertips gliding across brittle paper. Every sheet tells the same quiet story. Something happened in the late 1600s, something big enough to make scribes rewrite the timeline in near synchrony across continents. A mainstream historical fact echoes in your mind. During this century,
Many nations standardized their record-keeping, aligning their chronologies and adjusting inconsistencies. That's true. Documented, clean, simple. But these pages aren't simple. They're frantic. Corrections slash through years like panicked heartbeats. Margins hold cryptic notes. No, this happened after. Or shift by 3. Or your personal favorite, a little doodle of a man shrugging under the phrase, "We start again." Historians still argue whether these revisions were simple clerical reforms or evidence of a deeper chronological distortion. You lift a page closer to the light and notice something unsettling. The ink glows faintly where a date has been scraped off and rewritten. You blink. It shouldn't do that. A little nervous laugh bubbles out of you. Glow-in-the-dark ink in the 17th century? Sure, why not? Maybe they also had neon signs that said, "Please don't notice the timeline reset." You head toward the back of the hall, where broken crates lie scattered like forgotten toys. Inside one, something metallic glints. You reach in and pull out a small device, smooth, bronze, shaped like a cross between a compass and a pocket watch. Its face is etched with constellations, but when you tilt it, the stars shift independently of gravity, realigning in ways that defy both astronomy and basic common sense. This is one of those phantom technologies people whisper about, artifacts that don't fit neatly into the known timeline. Mainstream scholars usually explain them as misidentified navigational tools. That's the official story. But as the bronze disc vibrates lightly in your palm, you can't help feeling it's a bit too advanced, too intentional, too aware. A soft tick echoes behind you. You turn and see a massive, dust-covered star chart on the wall. Lines cross, circles loop, annotations cluster around specific dates, then suddenly stop. Around 1680, everything halts. Constellations are crossed out and redrawn slightly off position as if the sky itself had shifted and astronomers were trying to pretend it hadn't. You remember a quirky tidbit. A handful of 17th century stargazers reported that certain stars wandered strangely for a brief period before settling back into their usual paths. Their colleagues called them sleep-deprived or drunk. Honestly, given how stressful that century was, both are entirely possible. The chart beckons you closer. You press your hand against the faded parchment, and for a heartbeat, the lines seem to pulse. Not move, just pulse, like an old memory stirring. You exhale slowly, letting your fingers trace the ink. The room feels quieter now, as if the hall itself is listening. You step away, weaving back through the tables, noticing more corrections, more crossed-out dates, more desperate attempts to create continuity where continuity had clearly shattered. And as you step outside, the cold air hits you like a truth you've been avoiding. The scribes weren't updating history. They were repairing it. You stand there, breath curling in the dim light, holding the bronze device gently in your palm. Its stars twirl once more, aligning into a tiny constellation you don't recognize. But something about it feels familiar, like a piece of the sky you were never meant to see. And as you let your hand fall to your side, you realize the timeline wasn't just rewritten. It was rebooted.
You walk away from the hall of frantic scribes, the bronze device warm in your hand, pulsing gently like a sleepy heartbeat. The path ahead winds through a valley dotted with stone cottages, some intact, some half swallowed by earth, and others standing proudly despite looking centuries older than they should. As you move closer, you notice something odd. The people who once lived here didn't seem to match the records you remember. According to early census logs, this region should have been empty. Wilderness, marshland, maybe a scattered fishing hut or two. But the structures around you tell a different story. You push open the door of a cottage and step into a room filled with dusty bowls, faded blankets, and a wooden cradle still hanging from its ceiling hook. A faint chill brushes the back of your neck. Someone lived here. Many someones. You can feel their presence like warm fingerprints pressed into the air. A mainstream historical fact clicks in your mind. The 17th century saw huge waves of migration due to wars, plagues, and climate shifts. Populations moved, vanished, reappeared. Nothing unusual there. But what you're seeing now isn't migration. This looks like population replacement.
Entire communities appear in the archaeological record without any clear trail leading to them. They emerge fully formed, like someone copy-pasted new people into the world. You step back outside and your boots sink slightly into the soft ground. The valley feels strangely staged, almost as though the reset didn't just rewrite timelines, it reshuffled humanity itself. A breeze rattles the cottage door behind you, and you can't help muttering, "Yep, totally normal. Nothing weird here at all." It's either humor or panic, and honestly, you're not sure which one your brain is choosing right now. A narrow trail leads uphill toward a grand estate, its stone facade cracked but still elegant. As you approach, you notice paper scraps littering the ground near its entrance, like leaves that forgot how to be leaves. You pick one up and recognize the handwriting immediately. Correspondence between scholars and wealthy patrons. Most letters show regular exchanges, requests for funds, updates on research, polite greetings. But then, suddenly, in the late 1600s, everything stops. The letters end mid-sentence. Some pages are torn, others smeared, as if someone deliberately blurred the ink while it was still wet. You step inside the estate and wander through the main hall. Portraits hang crookedly on the walls, faces painted in careful strokes, eyes that seem to follow you. But several frames sit empty. Gold leaf borders remain, but the canvases are missing. A quirky little rumor pops into your mind. Some 17th century patrons were known to remove portraits when a lineage became inconvenient. What a polite phrase for disappearing people. You enter a smaller chamber, off to the right. The room is bare except for a heavy iron door built into the floor. The hinges are rusted, but the lock, strangely, is polished and clean, as if someone's been maintaining it. You kneel, grip the ring handle, and pull. The hatch opens with a groan and a puff of stale, cold air. Your breath catches in your throat. Beneath the estate, stretching far deeper than any cellar has a right to be, lies a vault. Shelves line the descending steps, packed with scrolls, maps, instruments, relics. So many that your eyes need a moment to adjust to the scale of it. You take a step down, then another, the bronze device in your hand vibrating more insistently now, as though recognizing something. You reach the nearest shelf and pull out a rolled map. When you open it, your pulse spikes. The map shows borders, massive ones, that don't exist anymore. Empires erased before they ever appeared in schoolbooks. Cities with names you've never heard of. Rivers drawn in courses that no longer match the land above. Historians still argue whether these anomalies are early drafts, political fantasies, or remnants of forgotten cartographers. Standing here, surrounded by evidence no one was supposed to see, you know the answer isn't that simple. You move deeper into the vault, scanning shelves stacked with artifacts that feel too organized to be accidental. Someone, many someones, collected everything that didn't fit the official narrative, cataloged it, hid it, guarded it. The reset wasn't just an event, it was a cover-up. You pause in the stillness, listening to the faint humming of the bronze device. Its tiny shifting constellations glow brighter, illuminating a final doorway at the end of the archive. A doorway waiting for you, and for the truth you're just beginning to sense.
You step through the doorway, your boots echoing softly against the cold stone, and the air feels heavier here, like it carries the memory of every erased century. The bronze device pulses in your hand, almost as if it's alive, guiding you forward. The shelves have thinned, the walls now lined with larger artifacts, tables stacked with strange mechanical devices, star globes, and what appear to be early scientific instruments that hum faintly when you pass. This is it, the reset mechanism. You can feel the weight of intention in the room, as though someone or some group decided it was time to hit restart on the world's timeline. You kneel and examine a curious device in the center, a complex lattice of bronze and glass. Levers, dials, and rotating rings suggest precise control, not randomness. Mainstream historians acknowledge mid-17th century scientific advances. Galileo, Kepler, and Descartes were revolutionizing understanding of the heavens and mechanics.
But no textbook mentions a single apparatus capable of subtly altering borders, calendars, and narratives in concert. Fringe theorists speculate, of course. Some claim there were temporal instruments tested quietly by alchemists or secret societies. Historians still argue whether these are metaphorical descriptions of political influence or evidence of something far stranger. You run your fingers along the cold bronze. The faint pulse matches your heartbeat, making you shiver. It's almost too much to comprehend. You rise, stepping toward a set of shelves containing stacks of letters and journals. The handwriting varies, noble, scholarly, frantic. Some pages describe the sky dimming for weeks, crops failing in synchrony, entire towns mysteriously emptied. A few surviving witnesses speak of a night when the sun stalled, and even those accounts are cautious, careful to avoid drawing attention. As you skim them, a sense of connection prickles your skin. You can almost hear their whispers echoing across centuries. We saw it, and now you do too. The vault begins to alive, the air vibrating softly with echoes of events deliberately erased. You notice old maps marking towns that vanish in later editions. Diaries hint at population resettlements, as if planners had swapped communities across borders, reassigning histories with cold precision. You pick up a fragment, a village in France suddenly populated by families from the Netherlands, a river redirected on paper alone, and no one afterward noticing the change. It's a controlled, subtle orchestration of human memory and geography alike. The reset wasn't violent in the traditional sense, it was surgical. A faint laugh escapes you as you recall earlier jokes about glowing ink, cats in census records, and scribes doodling tiny faces on official documents. Humor was always survival. Even those orchestrating the reset may have left these little signatures, tiny breadcrumbs to hint at what happened without admitting it. You tuck the fragment under your arm and move to the far corner of the vault. Here, the remaining artifacts pulse with almost a gentle insistence, as though urging you to understand their purpose, the carefully hidden history preserved for eyes like yours. You pause, feeling the enormity of realization settle in. Modern history has gaps, intentional, curated, sanitized. The 17th century anomaly wasn't just an odd climatic period or political reshuffle. It was a coordinated recalibration, a global event that remade maps, societies, and even the perception of time itself. And now, holding the final fragment in your hands, you understand why it was never meant to be noticed. Because knowing it challenges everything you think you know about the past. You exhale, stepping back, letting the dim hum of the vault sink into your bones. Outside, the night feels quieter, the stars aligned differently, yet oddly familiar. The reset echoes softly in the world around you, subtle but persistent, and you realize that glimpsing it changes the way you see everything.